and welcome to the Blockleaders podcast with me, Gillian Gotzel. And I'm delighted to have as my guest Samson Mow, who is the CEO of Jan3 and also of Pixelmatic. So, Samson, first of all, thank you very much for your time today in talking with me.
Thank you, Julian. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I've got some really interesting questions to ask you, and I know you're an interesting person. But perhaps can we start off with your background? Can you tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are now?
Sure. I'm a game developer by trade. I worked at Relic and doing RTS games, then Ubisoft doing online games and working on Might and Magic and Smurfs and other IPs. And then I started Pixelmatic. From there, I somehow managed to join a Bitcoin exchange company in China called BTC China or BTCC. And I served as COO there for about 2 years. And then I joined Blockstream, a Bitcoin infrastructure company.
Hmm.
And then I started Jan3 to focus more on worldwide Bitcoin adoption, or as we say it, accelerating hyper-Bitcoinization.
Good term, good term. So you were a gamer before you were a blockchain or crypto person.
Yeah, I prefer Bitcoin. I don't really like
Okay.
crypto.
Okay, okay, we'll go with Bitcoin. There is
There's a
difference.
big difference. There's a big difference.
There is absolutely. No, no, hugely. It was like, again, quoting when I was in London last month, I was saying, not all crypto is created equal, which is even embarrassing to put Bitcoin in the crypto expression. So I apologize for that. Okay, so you were a gamer first. When did Bitcoin come into your world then?
So I would say late 2014 was when I
Mhm.
really started getting into it. But I read about it in 2013 and I'd been aware of it because I used to read a lot of news through RSS feeds. So it
Hmm.
would come up a lot. But it wasn't until 2013 that I started to really get interested and learn more about how Bitcoin worked, mainly through mining and understanding how mining worked.
And did you, I'm presuming now because you are CEO of a company wants to accelerate hyper Bitcoinization. So the whole philosophy behind Bitcoin, or is it the financial freedom? You know, what is it about Bitcoin that makes you go, I think the world should all know about this?
Well, I think it's really the financial freedom part, but also making the world a better place. If you look at most of the problems in the world, and we as Bitcoiners like to say, Bitcoin fixes this, all of these problems in the world are fixable by Bitcoin because money is the base layer of human civilization. It's what we use to trade and to specialize in different disciplines, like game developer or podcaster or things like that. We couldn't do these things if we're still constantly sustenance farming and producing things for basic needs because we have to produce everything. But because of specialization through trade and using money for trade, we can do all the things that we can do today. So the problem we're facing in the world is that the money is broken. It's been hacked. If you look at money as an operating system, central banks have hacked it. It wasn't supposed to be this way when you have a hard money standard, like say, for example, gold in its most ideal form factor and use case, which is pure gold, and potentially coins made of pure gold. But as you get the clipping of coins or the mixing of impure metals into coins, and then you move into paper money where it's completely segregated from the underlying asset. It's just a in God we trust or full faith and credit, no longer backed by anything, then you have a problem. And this is why we have societal ills today where, it seems like everything is on the decline. We're seeing staggering amounts of inflation, even in Western countries. We're seeing people unable to pay their basic bills and to provide for their families. And there's just no way for them to own property like a house, even remotely.
Mm.
So all of these problems are fixed by Bitcoin adoption because Bitcoin is a return to that hard asset. It's a return to a bearer instrument that you yourself can hold. And that bearer instrument is so critical because when money is no longer a bearer, it's outsourced. And when it's outsourced, the person dealing with it on your behalf can do whatever they want to it. They can rehypothecate, lend it to someone else, but they can corrupt it and, you know, do whatever they want with it at that point. So the bearer instrument aspect of Bitcoin is probably is what what makes Bitcoin so important. Also the mathematical properties, the finite cap of Bitcoin at 21 million units, and the ability to verify on any computer. But I think the bearer part is probably
Mhm.
the most key thing here.
Just interesting for people who might be watching this, who maybe aren't into Bitcoin, whatever, what you're saying is eminently true. I did a lot of activism a couple number of years ago, and prior to my generation, each new generation would expect to do better and be better off than their parents through hard work, education, blah, blah, blah. That just disappears then. So people can't get houses and they can't advance themselves. Just basic things that well, the people would require, certainly a roof over your head and food on the table. So you are very focused. You think Bitcoin solves everything because it's a bearer instrument, and it takes back control. And the Jan3 is accelerating hyper-Bitcoinization. So are you working with, is it through private levels or with government? How are you hoping to achieve this?
So we have a two-pronged approach. One is we're engaging with governments, politicians, working with groups in different regions like Freddie and his group. But
Bitcoin
also
policy.
we're also developing the Aqua Wallet, which is a wallet intended to onboard the next billion people into Bitcoin. And this is using layer 2 technologies like Liquid and Lightning. So if we look at the opportunity or total addressable market cap for Bitcoin, it's massive. It's trillions and trillions of dollars because we still have billions and billions of people to onboard to Bitcoin, right? We might be at maybe 100+ million adopters, maybe if we're generous,
Mm-hmm.
but there are still 8 billion more people to bring into Bitcoin. So we want to be one of the wallets that brings on that next billion people. And by using Liquid and Lightning, we think that we can onboard them into this Bitcoin ecosystem because they can receive Bitcoin easily, cheaply, and spend it. So we can use Aqua Wallet to jumpstart communities or even entire countries if they want to use this and they want to have a national wallet that's branded with their own branding.
Tell me, because as someone who entered this space in about 2017 from a fintech background, I found it very difficult to get my head around all the keys. I mean, first of all, the whole money philosophy, which now makes total utter sense to me. But at the time, I was going, "How does this work? What's happening?" You have to question things. So I want to know. I haven't used your Aqua Wallet. Is it easy to use?
It is very easy to use. So Aqua is designed for an average person. And one of our taglines is it's so easy your grandma can use it. So you
Okay.
download from the App Store. We don't force you to back up your seed phrase, the 12 words
Mm-hmm.
immediately. We'll remind you once you get some money into the wallet, but we don't want to create any barriers. So you could just download it and receive money from someone else. And we think this easing of people into the Bitcoin ecosystem is very important because you don't want to front load all the complexity and difficulties like backing things up right away. But once they have a little Bitcoin, then they should be incentivized to learn more. It's all about financial incentives. If you have no money in your wallet, you're less likely to be interested to back up a seed. But once you have it, we'll tell you, well, you should back it up, write it down on a piece of paper, not connected to the internet, and keep it in a safe place. So the goal is to gradually handhold people into the Bitcoin ecosystem. And as they get more and more money, then we'll remind them to do more and more things. So we haven't implemented this yet, but when we do have enough funds in their savings account on the Bitcoin main chain, we'll remind them to possibly buy a hardware wallet too. So it's this gradual onboarding process. But I don't think it's difficult for people to back up 12 words.
Mm-hmm.
IT security is not something that a lot of people are familiar with, but I don't think it's something that's too hard for someone to learn. If you can drive an automobile, I think you can write down 12 words and keep it in a safe place. I mean, these days you have people making TikTok videos where they're refurbishing, I don't know, a kid's car or something, and they're 3D printing parts for it. And if you can do all of that, I'm pretty sure you can back up 12 words safely
Yeah.
somewhere.
So tell me now, just I'm curious with the Aqua Wallet. So it's only for Bitcoin, I presume. You're not going to entertain other cryptocurrencies?
Well, it supports Bitcoin main chain. It
Yeah.
supports layer 2 Bitcoin, so
Okay.
Liquid Bitcoin and Lightning.
Yeah.
And it supports Tether on the Liquid network. So Liquid,
Okay.
if you don't know, is a Bitcoin sidechain. And a sidechain is just a way for Bitcoin to scale. It's a way to abstract away main chain fees and to speed things up and make it more user friendly.
Mm-hmm.
So this, well, it technically does support crypto if you think Tether is
Mm-hmm.
a cryptocurrency or whatnot. But I tend to separate things as Bitcoin, stable coins, and then crypto, like
Yeah.
dog coins and everything else in Ethereum in that batch.
Okay. All right, interesting. So then tell me also, you were saying you work with governments and politicians. You've quite a high profile presence in the work in El Salvador. Tell me how you got involved there and what you were doing.
Well, that just kind of happened. So that was my friend Jack Mallers. He was there, and he called me one day and said, "Hey, I'm t meeting with the president here, and we're talking about implementing a Bitcoin law." And we started engaging with the government too, alongside a few other people. And I guess the rest is history. But I did propose to them to create a Bitcoin bond, and we created a structure for that, and a lot of modeling about what would happen with that type of instrument. So that could have, they're still yet to do it, but that would technically allow them to get rid of all their debt, and not be under the thumb of the IMF or any other globalist organization, because they would raise capital backed by sovereign debt and buy Bitcoin with that.
Yeah.
And by accumulating a hard asset, but having your debts denominated in a weaker asset, you can basically eliminate the debt. And I think this is a model we're very hopeful for the rest of Latin America and the developing world, because most of these countries will never pay off their debts.
Mm.
Either they're going to default and have some foreign powers come in and restructure, or they're going to have to buy Bitcoin. And the sooner they do this, the more better they will be because of the early mover advantage.
It's amazing. So tell me then, with the Bitcoin, I mean, the question everyone's asking at the moment, sort of flipping into modern talk, is, are we in a bull run now?
I think we're at the early stages of a bull run. We're not at a bull run.
Mm.
Because if you look at Bitcoin all-time highs adjusted for inflation, we are not there yet. That should probably be about 79,000 US dollars to be a new all-time high adjusted for inflation. But we are at, new US dollar all-time highs in terms of the pure number. So we've
Yeah.
crossed that $69,000 mark. But I would say the bull run starts somewhere at 100 to $200,000 per Bitcoin.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. And that'll be affected by the halving, presumably, or will that be, is that too soon, do you think, to impact?
Well, the halving doesn't impact price directly. The halving impacts the production supply. And
Mm.
this is something that a lot of people get confused with. Robert Kiyosaki he recently posted something about the halving will let you get more Bitcoin, but that's not the case. Your fiat value of your Bitcoin holdings will likely go up, but not as a direct impact of the halving itself. Halving, it just means that the supply that the miners produce per block is halved. So instead of 6.25 Bitcoin per Bitcoin block, they'll get 3.125.
Mm.
So what you see there is an increase in scarcity. The supply is decreasing. So you have less supply and you have much more demand from ETFs and other entities like MicroStrategy and Tether buying Bitcoin.
Mm.
So the supply and demand imbalance is what drives up the price.
But it traditionally, exactly, the scarcity, I didn't actually mean to imply that the halving in itself was a financial tick, except that it combined together. You mentioned the ETFs, and we're kind of, that's old news now, but were you astonished when they started being signed off, or do you think it's about time, or and what do you think about the institutional money that's coming into this space?
I was very bullish on the approval of the ETFs because
Mm.
the legacy system just demands Bitcoin
Mm.
because it is aware that the legacy system is failing and the dollar is being printed massively and debt levels are astronomical now. So when these companies like BlackRock and Fidelity file, it's not necessarily for themselves, but for their customers. So the demand is coming from their customer base.
Mm. Of course,
So
yes.
and that customer base can exert influence at the government level too, through working with senators or um, MPs or whatever. They can exert a lot of influence. So the demand has to be met, and that is through the approval of the ETFs. But that ETF approval opened this portal into legacy finance where money can pour into Bitcoin. And I think it's a very substantive change in market dynamics for Bitcoin. So you have a portal open now, which is bringing in, $500 million a day. Yeah. $500 million, possibly more, possibly $1 billion a day in the future. But this steady demand changes the entire market structure of Bitcoin. So what we'll see is a lot less volatility, um, not as many steep drawdowns, and that will beget more money coming into Bitcoin, and that will, combine with the supply demand imbalance, drive the price up. And as the price increases, because Bitcoin is a Veblen good, it is susceptible to the Veblen effect. The more expensive Bitcoin gets, the more people want it because they see it as something that they can put their savings into, much like real estate was
Mm.
back for the boomer generation. So this is why I was saying to your question earlier, when does the bull run start? It starts at probably 100K above, maybe 200K. That's when people start to see what Bitcoin is and where it's going to go to.
And what do you think then, since we're talking about price, what do you think is a fair price for Bitcoin? In, next 5 years, 10 years, is there?
In 5 to 10 years, I don't think we'll be pricing Bitcoin in terms of other things. It'll just be things are priced in Bitcoin in terms of Satoshis, the smallest unit of Bitcoin. So when you buy a sandwich, it might cost you 5 Satoshis.
Oh, I like that idea. So a total flip over in terms of how how you put a value on the goods that you're buying.
Yeah.
And but then just to go back, sorry, but do you think then, like obviously John McAfee famously declared that the late John McAfee, that he would eat his genitals if we didn't get to 1 million whatever last year, which neither happened sadly for the late John McAfee. So do you think like would it hit those kind of crazy prices, or do you?
Yeah, it's not, those prices are not crazy. So I also have a prediction for $1 million Bitcoin
Uh-huh.
this year. And Kathy
When,
Wood
sorry,
up
this year?
this year. Kathy Wood has a prediction now, I think, for $3.8 million. But if you look at the overall legacy financial system, these are not crazy numbers. So every day, the US is $10 billion more in debt.
Mm.
That's based off of a 1 trillion every 100 days metric. So $10 billion, you would think that's crazy, but everyone just kind of goes on with their lives.
Yeah.
So $1 million Bitcoin is not crazy when you compare that to $1 billion in debt a day. That's just astronomical, but
Mm.
people seem to be okay with it. So I don't know why you cannot be not okay with $1 million Bitcoin.
I like your thinking. It's very refreshing. Thank you. Okay, so another topic. I'm jumping topics here. Apologies, because I have you in front of me. CBDCs, poison chalice or silver bullet?
Uh, well, it's just never going to work. And I think the best example, so it's neither. It's just not going to take
Okay.
off the ground. We already have centralized money. Digitalized centralized money from a centralized bank is not innovative at all, right? Like when you go to your bank, it is all digital. When you look at your phone and you check your balance, it is all digital. When you transact, you're transacting digitally. So you're doing it on a centralized system. It's just a CBDC purports to be on a blockchain, but a blockchain, as we know, doesn't really mean anything if it's a centralized blockchain. It's just a database, an inefficient database at that point. But the bigger picture is CBDCs won't work because nobody wants to use money that is not free and is susceptible to the same limits and controls as the other money, the other digital money from their bank. So examples are Nigeria. They issued their own CBDC, the e-Naira, a couple of years ago. And if you look at the marketing on the website, it was, for your own protection, no, for your safety, for your convenience. This is completely optional. It's just for your benefit. But then only 1% or sub 1% of the population end up using it. So then they started restricting cash withdrawals from ATMs. So what is an optional nice thing for the people? It's not really that. And the facade disappears when people don't use it. And then it got to be the point where now they're cracking down on crypto because they
Mm.
think that this is the competitor to their CBDC, and they're trying to arrest, or they did arrest some executives from like some exchanges. But the fact is nobody wants to use money that they cede control of to someone else because
Actually, not new money. I mean, if you're going to, like,
yeah.
we already do cede our control to central banks. So why would you flip it over, given the choice?
Yeah, it's sort of like going to you have a country with hyperinflation and you're wheeling around barrels of cash. Maybe you'd be okay with switching to something else when you have no choice. But given that you have a choice of Bitcoin,
Mm,
it's no one's going to go to a inferior money. The freest money is always the money that wins out because money is not meant to be constrained to something physical. And this is why Bitcoin is so transformative and magical because Bitcoin has no physical form. So if you think about what money is, it is simply an abstraction layer for human trade. Like you and I can trade.
mm.
If you make something that I want, I can get it from you. But maybe you don't have, I don't have something you want. So we just use this third thing that is money. But if you think about it, money doesn't really have a form. And the fact that we try to imbue it with a physical form is a weakness. So if we're using seashells, those seashells degrade. If we're using beads, those beads can be lost or stolen, or they can be counterfeited, and then you have physical coins that you can't verify the authenticity of, and then you have paper bills that that you can also counterfeit those, but the biggest problem is that they're printed out of thin air. So every time you bring money into the physical realm, there's a trade-off. But with Bitcoin, you don't have that trade-off because there's no physicality. There's no need to have someone make something that you peg your money to. It's a return to the origin of money. And this is why Bitcoin will win because it is so incorruptible.
Oh, question for you. When you say it brings it to the origin of money, but was the origin of money not those beads or the spice or the salt or the...
Well, the origin of money is really trade. All those things are facilitating trade, right? But
Okay.
money, if
No,
you think
I was
about it, you don't
curious.
like those physical forms are allowing us to scale up money, but money is a peer-to-peer thing. It
Yeah.
is one human trading value with another human. And if it's just two of us, we can keep a pretty good ledger in our heads. Like, you owe me 10 apples. I owe you a coffee, right? But when you scale it up to a village, then you start to need something else because no one can remember everything that everyone owes every other person.
Yeah.
So the need to scale is also what did in physical money and fiat money.
Mm.
But Bitcoin fixes that because now we keep our own ledger when you run your own node, and there is no physicality to that money.
Okay. No, interesting. I like your insights. So, companies like Renewablock, I think you're familiar with them. They capture wasted energy from the national grid. So, do you think over time that Bitcoin mining will be seen as carbon negative and a significant ESG asset? So that's like a
Well,
movement away.
Bitcoin is already carbon negative, and I think people just have to get to that understanding. I've seen like since BlackRock became interested in Bitcoin, the mainstream media narrative has shifted greatly to talking more positively about Bitcoin in environmental terms, whereas in the past they would talk a lot about Bitcoin boiling the oceans. So I
And
think that
even
is,
Greenpeace USA put out a report there recently that was damned. You probably saw that. Uh,
yeah,
the USA branch and
yeah, but
everybody damned it. Mm.
Greenpeace was bribed by Ripple to attack Bitcoin. So no one really cares much about their opinion on this matter because we know they're bought and paid for. They're not actually an environmentalist group. They're just some paid group that is masquerading as an environmentalist group. If they were really serious about the environment, they would dig deeper than, well, they would actually not take money from Ripple, but first they would do a bit of research and
Yeah, and
understand the fundamentals. So I think the world is going to this place where they do understand Bitcoin is a beneficial technology, not just for the environment, for balancing grids as well, and for incentivizing new energy production. And I think
mm,
at the nation state level, we can drive that too, because we've had a lot of conversations where governments do want to reduce emissions for various targets they're aiming for. And Bitcoin is a viable method to do that exactly.
actually, that's true. And I think you know Jason Dean, don't you?
Yes.
But he was saying, he said, he's the co-CEO of Renewablock. That's where he was giving me some information. But he said, countries where electricity grid is nationalized, like Costa Rica and France, Bitcoin mining is used by government to mitigate methane emissions and build out variable renewables. Can you see this happening?
Yeah, well,
Jason.
when we engaged in Colombia and we met the president, he was very keen to tap into Bitcoin mining to reduce emissions and to remove one flare gas installation specifically, a very big flare installation. So I think we are going to see a lot more of this happening.
So finally, you know how people, if you measure, for example, an employment in a country, here in Ireland, we have full employment. I think it's something like, there's 5% people who are not working. It's a very small people, whatever. How will you measure the success of Jan3 to accelerate hyper-Bitcoinization? What are the measurements that you will look to say, yes, we've done it?
Well, I would say we see a lot more people using Bitcoin. We see more countries onboarded and having some sort of Bitcoin strategy. But it's just more Bitcoin adoption. I think that's our metric.
Okay, so it's a percentage. I mean, like you were saying, there's what, a couple of 100 million people using Bitcoin at the moment.
Maybe 100 million at
100 million
best
at best.
as
And
an
there's what, 9
estimate.
billion in the world. So we have a way to go.
Yeah, 8
Mm.
point something billion people, I think.
Okay. Okay. Oh, interesting. Well, so thank you very much for your time. I'm going to check out your Aqua wallet. I didn't actually, I haven't checked it out so far. I'm going to do that. Thank you very much for your
Yeah.
time, Samson. Very interesting. And you had a lot of new ways of looking at things, which I really enjoyed as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Julian. It's been fun.